Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome to the channel. I'm, of course, your host, Droodles, Blitz, and in today's video, we are going to be doing an in-depth map tutorial video on mines. This is one of the easiest maps to understand in the game. It's literally all about the hill. If you push your tank anywhere else but the hill, now there are a couple exceptions here. You could be running vehicles like an AMX-50B or even a light tank, maybe sometimes a medium, where you might not always push up the hill, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. But for 99% of the time, the most important spot, the only spot you should be pushing your tanks is the hill on mines. I've got a teammate here who's in platoon with me. He's in the M6 yo. He's doing the right thing. However, my team in the M5 yo, we've got the VK45, T57 Heavy, and even an IS-8 over here. They are the reason we lose this battle. Controlling the hill gives you just overwhelming superiority over any other tank, and it's pretty easy to understand why. Not only do you get to cover the tank destroyer bush, I'm in the 183 over there, and you can clearly see as soon as I get detected, these heavies can stay hull down, protected, and shoot me in the tank. As well, for the other side, you can do that on here. And if you're able to get past the plethora of heavies and get up this hill, oh man, that is when you become incredibly strong. Vehicles like my 121 are doing the right thing. Unfortunately, he's put his tank in the wrong spot. You want to put your 121 in a spot like this, so that way the enemy 60 TP would have to drive all the way up here, and then at that point, I'm able to shoot him in my 183 sitting there. Now, but to be honest, we lose this battle. As I did say, controlling the hill is the most important spot, and the enemy 60 TP is able to do that just correctly by, well, you guessed it, going up that hill and getting overwhelming superiority over my team, doing 3,800 damage, and my team gets completely farmed by one single Waffenträger because they just couldn't push. That is just one of the things. I mean, look at the tanks that push there. 1,100 damage, 300 damage, and 0 damage. I mean, yeah, this is what happens when players don't understand how to play on mines. Wow, yeah, gotta love these players on my team. But that is just one of the downsides of mines, is that when you have a team that does not understand where to go, it's like playing on Middleburg. Your team goes down and you're like, well, this is a loss. So let's make our way over to World of Tanks heat maps. Now, if you don't know what this is, World of Tanks Inspector, which is where I use all my armor, where I show you guys weak spots on certain tanks, well, they also have something called heat maps. And basically how heat maps works, I'll pull up mines for a perfect example. It actually shows you where every single player that has submitted replays to Blitz Stars has pushed their vehicles. So here on mines, you can see that we've got tanks that have pushed on the red team and the green team. And the best part is experience. Now, this shows you where the number of XP earned battles were played. So the worst battles are 0 to 600 experience, and it shows you where these players most of the time push their tanks. So you can see we got a bunch of red here, bunch of red over here, all of these areas. If we break onto the green, that's where average games are played. So you can see there's a bunch of green here. But if you'll notice, all the pink, literally the only pink you will notice, apart from maybe a little bit of a smudge here, is here. As I said, controlling the center of this map is the most important thing in the game. And if you are ever thinking slightly that you should push a heavy tank to this side of the map, you're in the wrong. It doesn't matter what heavy you're in. 90% of the time, you should be on this hill. You can see that all of the best games played on mines were done on this hill. You have overwhelming superiority over every tank. And sure, you can get some decent games off to this side, and I'll be talking about certain tanks that can push there, but for the most part, if you control the center, you win the game. So let's break over to Strat Sketch. I put up a bunch of different types of tanks here with different playstyles, so I'll showcase where I would put my tanks. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But I'm going to be showing you where I would personally position my tanks and how I'm able to benefit from pushing them. So let's start off with the first ones in the list, the T57 Heavy and the AMX-50B. Now these are two very situational tanks. The 57 Heavy has a great clip. It's got a 1200 damage clip. Unfortunately, the tank doesn't have a lot of turret armor. Now, does that mean I'm going to push the tank off to the side over here or over here? Well, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push it straight up to this rock. This is an incredibly important spot. If you're able to drive your T57 Heavy right up to this position, what what you can do is you can use the rock to cover your tank. So you're not going to be hit by the tank destroyers. You're not going to be hit by any of the vehicles unless you expose your track wheels this way or this way. And because you have a clip plus 8 degrees of gun depression, all you need to do with those 8 degrees is position your tank here, and then bam, 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 3 shells into the enemy when you're loaded your clip. Just poke it sideways, get 3 shots in, and then back up. Even if you trade 400 hit points, I mean, you're easily out-trading the enemy 400 for 1200. So you tell me who's the winner there. However, the AMX-50B is not a tank that I would suggest to push over here. This is one of the few tanks that I would say is not actually supposed to go to the hill because, well, it's fast, sure, but it's not fast enough to beat the mediums and the light tanks like the ones we have listed here. So what I would suggest to honestly do in the 50B, as well, it's too tall to actually sit here because tank destroyers can shoot right through this little crease in the rocks here. My suggestion for a vehicle like the AMX-50B would, as much as I hate to say it, actually push off to the side. When you're in a 50B, you're all about that mobility, and if you're quick enough to get off to the side here, you can actually catch their tank destroyers off guard, get some shells in, and if they don't have tank destroyers that are there, you can push straight through and around and start getting shells into the enemy team. It can be absolutely fantastic. So that is one really big good bit of advice for the 50B. It's one of those really tricky tanks that I would actually suggest to push over towards town. The E100, while it may seem like a town push because it has no turret armor, no. I would actually push my E100 right around here. Now, you have a hill, and this hill is massive. I mean, it's not even a hill. It's basically a cliff. This cliff covers a lot of weak spots on your vehicle. If you are in an E100, and let's say the enemy's poking this here, all you do is you wait for them to poke, and you shoot them, and then you just back up, and you can back right around this corner, and you're in cover, because obviously the enemy cannot shoot through a literal cliff. So the U100, sure, it's got very weak turrets, but it's got enough gun depression at 7 degrees, and it's got very big alpha. So any enemy tanks that are trying to cross are going to lose 640. Any enemy tanks that are trying to poke here or even here, you can easily tap. And again, if you get shot back, you have a lot of hit points, and as well, you have massive damage to out-trade the enemy. So I actually always push my E100 to this spot on the map. You do not want to push it over to here, because you'll be tapped in the turret every time. You want to make sure that you're putting your tanks in correct scenarios. You could push a 50B where the E100 would be, but I still really wouldn't suggest it. Now the Yo and the 60 TP every day right over to these positions. I mean, both of these tanks are hull down monsters. The Yo has 10 degrees of gun depression. It's got a ridiculously strong turret. Same for the 60 TP. All you need to do in these two vehicles is hide your lower plate and control the hill, and you basically win. That goes the same for the enemy team. The E100 pushes over here, uses that wall again. The IS-7 and the Kranvang, I mean, it's pretty simple to understand that the Kron is an incredibly strong hull-down tank, and the IS-7 is just like the 60 TP, where if you hide that lower plate and you're using the 6 degrees of gun depression the vehicle has, it's just enough to work Mines Hill. Now, one rule of thumb is never poke past this point. I'll even make it in red, just so you know. This is the point of no passing. It's the dead man zone. You never do it. It's no man's land. The reason you never want to pass this red line here is because the enemy team has tank destroyers. Now, for tank destroyers, I didn't actually put them in here, but I mean, tank destroyers are pretty simple. You put one here, you put one here. It doesn't really matter where you put a TD. You can put one here. Obviously, this side of the map, you're really only putting them there. Those are the only spots on this side I would ever suggest to put TDs, unless you're maybe in an E3. An E3, yeah, of course, you'll push it up in the front line, or a Badger, because it's a heavily armored tank destroyer. But for the most part, as I was saying, when you get up to this red line, if you cross it, tank destroyers have very easy shots into your vehicles. So you just want to stay hidden here. That also persists for this spot. If you push past this rock, boom, shells are flying right into your vehicle across from here or over here. You never ever want to cross this point unless you have a very good reason for it, or you know the enemy team is on reload, they're not going to shoot you, because if you cross it, it is definitely on you when you bleed all of your health. But for the most part, you don't want to really stop past this point here on both of these vehicles. You only need around 6 degrees of gun depression suppression to work Mines Hill, which is fantastic. That means that you can easily sit on the hill, you can work it with basically any heavily armored tank, and get some pretty nice shots into the enemy. Now, what do we have left? Well, we've got a Bat Shotzi 25 ton. Now, just like the AIM X50B, you have two choices. A is you can push over towards this side, and you can try and spot any enemy heavy tanks that are pushing over here, and if you don't spot any tanks, then what you can do is a really sneaky maneuver and drive all the way around here and come up behind their team, starting to put pressure on their tank destroyers. It's risky because if the enemy tries to push on you this way, you can die, but at the same time, if you're smart, you can also just push your bat around here and get some shells into these vehicles. The reason I don't suggest to do it this way is because if they have tank destroyers here, yeah, I mean, they're shooting you right in the side. So my best suggestion is to push a bat all the way around, and there's obviously a bit of rocks here. This formation covers you. So if you push the vehicle around the formation here, you can sit in a position like this and get shells into the rear of the enemy. And if the enemy tank destroyers try to shoot you, then you can push up and try and get some shots in. Vehicles like the Batchat are fantastic distractions on what the main actual battle is going on. The only other spot I'd actually suggest to put a Batchat is right here. The reason I'd say that is because you actually have fantastic shots from here straight across into here. A lot of people don't realize this, but when medium tanks get into this position and they're shooting at your team, let's just pretend this is a medium tank, you can actually shoot through this crease in the rocks here right into the mediums, or onto this spot here as well. It's honestly fantastic. You can get some really nice shots out, and if you're in a Batchat, you can stay far enough away at like this corner here that you won't be detected by the mediums, so it's fantastic. Of course, you can also push further up here. You can try and spot tank destroyers that are here, and you can use this bush right here to get shells into the side of enemy heavy tanks that are trying to back up. I would suggest either way. Depending on what tanks the enemy team has, you can decide on your own. Would you rather push to this side or this side in the Batchat? Now, for me personally, I like pushing over here more. It's more comfortable. You can see where the enemy team's going, and if crap goes down the drain, then you can use your mobility and come around and flank. You always have that option with mobility. When we break into a vehicle, let's say like the Vickers, you just drive up the hill. I mean, that's really all you do. Even if you can't get up the hill, you can just use it like a hull-down tank and just kind of poke this hill and get some pretty nasty shots in, just like the front line heavies. But yeah, for the most part, you want to get up here in a Vickers. You're quick enough to do it, and you have enough DPM to fight vehicles. That also goes for vehicles like the 121. While you may not want to cover this hill in the 121, because this vehicle has good turret armor, the 121 fits in the same bracket of vehicles like the T62A, the 121B, the Object 140. Any tank that has decent turret armor, you can actually push it right here. This is a fantastic spot. You are covered by the tank destroyers because there's this little bit of a rock that sticks out here. You can see it right there. That rock completely covers you from tank destroyers if you poke it correctly, and you can get shot straight into the enemy heavies while doing that. As well, you can actually back up right behind this little itty-bitty part here, and you're actually completely covered by the enemy heavies. It's a fantastic spot. I love to go there, and it's where I'll push vehicles like the 62A, the 121, any vehicles like, even a good example here is the Patton. Again, the Patton you push right there. You can use its hull-down capabilities and get out some ridiculously high damage games. I mean, that's just what the heat maps show here. You can see that there are tanks that will love to go to this spot, and you can also push right here. When you need to back up, you just go, you know, if you're a medium here, you get a nice snapshot, you just back up. A lot of you are probably knowing this spot from its notorious mediums that like to poke there. And if a lot of bad things happen, let's say the enemy team, let's say these guys try to push over the hill like this, well, you can just literally drive your Patton right down the hill. And that goes for the 121 as well. You can just drive it right down the hill. It's honestly fantastic to work. The final tanks we have left is the Leopard and as well the Progetto. Now the Progetto is an interesting tank. It's not fast enough to get up the hill, but it's also not having enough turret armor to work this spot. What would I suggest to do? Well, I'd actually put it right where the 121 is. You might be questioning, well, why is that? Well, if we look here, as I did say, there is a dip here, and you can hide your tank very easily in this spot or this spot. It basically cradles it so you're not being shot at, and you're completely covered by the rocks. if the enemy team decides to push their vehicles here, basically what you can do in the progetto, which I've done many times, is when the enemy decides to push maybe a little bit too aggressive up here, I'm just trying to get at the drawing thing, a little bit too aggressive on either side, or tanks here or here decide to poke, you in the progetto are able to get shells straight into their vehicles. It's fantastic. Sorry for all the clutter here, it's pretty weird looking, but this is how a mines battle should look. Every single tank should be focusing on the main hill, unless you are a tank like the 50B, as I did say. And finally, we have the Leopard. Now, again, the Leopard does the same role as the Progetto. You can, well, actually, it's a little bit different. You can push the Leopard up the hill. It's got good DPM. It can contest the Vickers. So you have a choice. You can either push the Leo up the hill, or you can push the Leopard again where the Patton would go and get some nice pot shots out. I know that this looks very hectic, but that's because there is never, ever a scenario, apart from very limited applications, that you should ever be pushing tanks to this side of the map. If you do this, you are in the wrong. It's not an opinion that I'm making. I mean, you can clearly see just from heat maps where the skilled players go. It is where I will push my tanks every time. If you ever come up against me or you see me on your team, I will be pushing my tank to the hill, unless I'm in a bat chat or something weird. This is my advice for vehicles in Blitz. It's pretty simple advice, and that's why I'm kind of weirded out why I had to make a video on mines. Obviously, a lot of you know where to push your tanks, but for the people that don't, and you proceed to push your vehicles this way, please don't. It is not the correct way to push your tank, and yeah, you should always be pushing here. Hopefully, all of you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see more like it, please consider smashing that subscribe button down below. If you agree or disagree with what I said, let me know in the comments down below, but I mean, mines is literally super simple. Any Unicum knows, go to the hill. That's literally all you got to do. If you win the hill, you'll win the game. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye!